Hey, I'm Rebecca from the blog and YouTube channel Moon and Magnolia, and I finally got a grain mill after months of research and months of waiting for it to arrive because it was on back order. So today, finally, I'm going to share with you my Mockmill grain mill review and unboxing. Before we get going, I want to note that this is not a sponsored video. This is my honest review of the Mockmill Professional grain mill. It is August 2024, and I ordered this for Mother's Day, so in May, and it took that long to receive my Mockmill. So that is something to keep in mind if right now in 2024 you are considering buying a Mockmill, is that there is a pretty long wait. I asked the seller why there was such a long wait, and they said there's a couple of reasons. One, there is an increase in demand for grain mills, which is super cool that everyone's milling their own grains, but also there is a part that has both a shortage and a high global demand, so they just can't keep up with the manufacturing. So if you are thinking about buying the Mockmill, particularly the Professional, do keep in mind that you might have to wait a few months for it to arrive. My husband and I researched grain mills for months to figure out what was the right one for us and our needs, and it really boiled down to three contenders: the Mockmill Professional, the KoMo Fitibus, and the Nutrimill Harvest grain mill. Now, because they are comparable machines, the number one reason why I chose the Mockmill Professional is because I like the way it looks. I know that might sound like a vain reason, maybe it is, but the reason why I wanted to make sure it matched my existing aesthetic is because a grain mill will most likely be sitting out on the counter or somewhere on display in your home. So if I was going to make this investment, because a grain mill is a large investment, I wanted to make sure that not only is it a good machine with a good warranty, but also that I like looking at it. In comparison to other Mockmill grain mills, because Mockmill does offer a number of different grain mill choices, I also landed on the Professional because it is a bit of a heavier duty machine. It's a little bit closer, but not quite, like an industrial grain mill, and it has a better warranty. Now that it's finally here, let's check it out. The setup instructions recommend running a handful of grains through the machine on setting 6 just to clean things out. I bought a few 5-pound bags of grains on Amazon. I'll link these in the description box below. It's not the most cost-effective way to purchase grains, but I didn't want to buy big bags until I know what grains I like to use. So this way I'm not stuck with more than what I'll use if I don't like the grain. Operating the Mockmill is really easy. You simply select the grade. In this case, it's grade 6. Turn the machine on and then add your grains. Mockmill is very clear that you should always turn the machine on before you add your grain. And once you do this initial run on grade 6, you can then mill grains on any setting that you want. Now, one of the things that I was unsure about is how loud this would be. I felt a little concerned about it, but it is actually not that loud. So here is what it sounds like. Another reason why I like the Mockmill is I like the way that you change the grind settings. Not only does it look nice and clean aesthetically in comparison to some other grain mills, but you can also change the settings all the way from 0, which is the finest grind size, to 20. So I think most people grind their flour on the lowest setting to keep it nice and fine. I'm still experimenting with that to see what is the right grind size. This just got here yesterday, so I have a lot to figure out, but don't you worry, I'll have more videos about that soon. One aspect that I was the most curious about was how does the freshly milled flour compare to store-bought flour? So here I am grinding some hard red winter wheat, and I am just separating out the flour from the bran. I'll talk more about that in a later video, but I am doing this so I can compare this flour to Pillsbury whole wheat flour, which is what I usually use for my rustic sourdough bread. On the left here is the bran, in the middle is the freshly milled flour, and on the right is Pillsbury whole wheat flour. Of course, all flour is different, and there are a lot of reasons why one flour would be finer or have a different texture than another, but this is just a side-by-side comparison of the two flours that I have. So just to show you the texture comparison, I'm sprinkling some on my cutting board, and the Pillsbury flour, which I'm smearing now, is much finer and it's almost creamy once I smear it, whereas the freshly milled flour is a little more granulated. So the fresh flour is definitely not as fine. Many of the other grain mills we looked at, you change the grind setting from the inside. And although that's fine, I actually just prefer the way this looks and the ease of how you change the grind size on the Mockmill. So that was another reason why I like this over, say, the Nutrimill, for example. And the KoMo, which actually has really great reviews, I really did not like the aesthetic quality of the grind size. It has a metal plate on the front of the grain mill. I just didn't like the way that looks. Now, my husband probably would have made a different decision that's not based upon aesthetics of what the front of the machine looks like for grind size, but I'm the one making the bread here, so this is the one I liked. As I journey into milling my own grains, I do plan on sharing videos that show some side-by-side comparisons of bread made with store-bought flour and bread made with fresh milled flour. So be sure to subscribe so you can stay in the loop about that. But one of the things I wanted to try off the bat was feeding my sourdough starter with some freshly milled flour. So I usually feed my sourdough starter with half whole wheat and half all-purpose flour, and I'm doing the same here, just with freshly milled red hard winter wheat. My sourdough starter, if anything, actually started to double in size a little bit faster, but it worked great as anticipated. But now let's look at some of the specs. The Mockmill Professional 200 is definitely an investment. It costs about $800. So if I'm buying something that expensive, I do want not just the quality of the machinery itself to be nice, but I want the whole outside and the aesthetic to be nice too. And the Mockmill Professional 200 definitely fits that bill. The fit and finish is really nice. The label's on straight. You can see that the screws are nice and flush. And these are things that are really important to me because I've found over the years when I make purchases that maybe aren't quite as much of an investment, it's those little details that aren't necessarily great. And in the long run, they don't really hold up as well. That's not to say that other grain mills don't look nice. I think they do. I actually think the Nutrimill looks really nice. I like the aesthetic quality of that and the wood grain, but this is a little bit more my style. And when I'm paying this much for something, I want it to not only work well, but also fit my personal aesthetic quality control, which admittedly can be a little bit obnoxious. The first time I ever saw the Mockmill on YouTube, actually, I thought it was ceramic because of the color, but it is not ceramic. It's actually natural wood. And according to Mockmill's website, this black part here is a natural acrylic stone. The other thing that I wanted to note that I feel like is important, especially if you plan on keeping this in your kitchen, it's not quite as big as I thought it was. So it's only about 15 inches high, 9.5 inches deep, and 8 inches wide. And of course, you can look those specs up on the internet, and I did, but in my mind it seemed a little bit bigger, but it turns out that it fits pretty nicely underneath my cabinet. Sometimes it's a little hard for me to envision these sorts of things, but now that it's here, it actually doesn't take up as much space as I thought it would. But a few things to keep in mind about the size is you will need some headspace to pour in the grain. So I have to pull this out from underneath of my cabinets, but then you will also need counter space for a bowl. So if you are considering getting a grain mill, make sure you think about those factors too, because you will need a little more space than just the footprint of the grain mill itself. These are just my initial thoughts about the Mockmill Professional 200 as I have unboxed it and just used it a couple of times over the first 24 hours of having it. I'm sure there is plenty more to say, which I will cover in time as I journey into milling my own grains. I'll be sharing more about this on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe, and on my blog over at moonandmagnolia.com, so be sure to sign up for the email list so you can stay in the grain mill loop. Thanks so much for stopping by today, and I will see you again next time.